Welcome to Mindful Drawing. I'm Robert, and I'll be your guide on this meditative practice that enters a space of mindfulness through the act of drawing. In that vein, our meditation today will be about motion. Finding a way to take something simple like a line, move it over space and time, bring in an action of rotation, maybe shifting, and let that become a place of exploring an expression of movement, of fanning out, of maneuvering and meandering, of extending with speed, of slowing to material. Building from the abstract point and line into slightly more figural arc and space, and finally seeing if we can find something in there that takes us from the realm of geometry on the page, the pencil and the paper's pure connection, to an expression of just a bit of something emerging in these 20 to 30 minutes we have here to explore together. But as always with these exercises of mindfulness, it's not about the product in the end, but how we enter into the exercise, how we use our full body, become aware of our presence in action in making this expression on the paper, follow the cues of our breath, ride rhythms internally, and find them expressed externally. The things that come out of the paper, a bonus, a place for our eyes to observe, our mind to observe, our visual sense, developing a language, a visual language of thinking and communicating through those marks on the paper. All that to say, no special skills required. Drawing a kind of straight line a couple of times, moving in a bit of an arc, or even another straight line, is all we'll really be doing. And then from there, just reaching into that drawing to see what we can pull out of it to ourselves, and hopefully enjoying the experience, finding a bit of relaxation, a little bit of work and exercise, and in the end, some fun and creativity. Go ahead and gather your supplies, establish your space, and let's draw together. I was thinking about a bit of a meditation on motion, a type of motion, and sketching some things out, and the thing I came up with was kind of the movement of a moment or a line. It's something there that exists in kind of two-dimensional way. It has some length in just a one-dimensional way, not even much width. But if it moves, if it were to rotate around somewhere, for instance, around its one end of it, we get a bit of an arc. And we can play around with that rotation. Maybe think of having something like a staff or in your hand, or a stick, or a leg moving. That initial line could rotate around, not center. And the lengths can change if it's rotating in 3D. I used to have these worksheets when I was in high school for geometry, descriptive geometry, projection. You'd get something like 2 lines on a page, and you had to figure out how to get from one to the other in different views. So that will be our basis for structuring the page. We'll play a little of different ways that you can experiment with movement and rotation just between the position of the same line in 2 places. It can be all over the place. That's something can move around the paper and set up the structure of the page. And then we'll look at the way we see the motion between those 2 kind of arc. It'll take some attention and practice to connect them, but not necessarily a circle, just something moving through space on that curve on both sides. And then depending on the symmetry, feel of directionality, that may go in one way or both directions and start to bring things together on the paper. Here in the warm-up stuff's a little collided, overlapping, crash together. We can guide that as you work through the exercise to choose how much overlap, collision, or separation there may be. So with a sense of that rotation of an axis or point through space, similar to moving the pen or pencil, moving the arms or legs, or an extension to a tool like a rake or something. Be fun to visualize and explore. And as those grow on the paper, we'll look at ways of perhaps emphasizing or changing that motion. Simple would be stretching out its repetition, kind of creating the steps between moments, even or compressed, depending on speed. Another might be the little lines that track when something moves to kind of flow across the air. These concentric rings that can flow from one end through the fulcrum of rotation out to the other and give a kind of sense of twist or motion. And multiple can happen at once, so we'll let that develop as it does throughout the drawing. Since some of the curves and arcs can be a little challenging depending on your position and orientation, so I might be using a pencil just so I could swipe a few times if I don't like the way it looks, something like that. But as you see, the pen will work just fine. Whatever comes in the movement. Let's give ourselves a couple of moments after the warm-up, after having some ideas maybe float through the mind, just to relax into them, sit into our space, take a couple of breaths with or without the pencil in the hands. Filling up a little bit of space, sipping it in at the top, and then letting it flow out, and notice the core, the support of the abdomen and the back, the rib cage, holding on to the shoulders and arms, sitting into those hips, really expanding, and then relaxing into your space, moving a little side to side, forward and back, just to make sure you're settled and present with the body. Be a lot of movement around the paper today, so starting wherever feels comfortable with an idea of that rotation, and do a little off axis, and I think have things rotate towards the center to make a more open space. But begin by drawing a line, kind of straight, but whatever feels right there. And I might hold the pen or pencil to it to think it a little bit, think about where it could rotate, spreading in, spreading out, spreading towards the middle or towards the side. And I'm going to spread towards the center but out of the page. A little eccentricity, not quite symmetrical. Perhaps a slight change in length happens there, but that's just the thing moving in space. We'll do a few of these around the paper, maybe building up some theme or consistency, or just a little filling out of territory. And they're a great place to start with that engagement of the body in the full motion of the action, engagement of the breath, and come to noticing our full experience there. So when you feel ready for the next line, breathing in deeply. When you feel you've filled out the space, engaging the paper and moving with the exhalation. Between these deeper filling and relaxing breaths, we can take a little of that time. The same thing, exploring with the device, how it might interact with the paper, consistency or direction that come into play. But when you're ready to draw the next line, you have it present in your mind, inhaling and filling out that space. Good and deep, and then engaging and expressing through the exhalation. We might bring time into the drawing as we work through them, thinking the first mark, the establishing mark, as we breathe in, leaves a stronger trace, maybe a little heavier line. So if you can on the next one, depending on your instrument. Breathe in and fill out some space and get to the top established position and express with a little bit more pressure, a little heavier action to that line. Similarly, if it can't get any heavier, the pen or pencil just does what it does. On the next one, once you've taken some time to think about that rotation and movement happening, setting an intention with the inhalation to draw a little lighter, filling out, finding place, and exhaling into the motion. And that difference of heavy and light can tell us before and after, A and B, just a difference that may come back later as part of the drawing. Do a few more of those. You can find your own pace and breath, continuing to fill out paper, playing with size, orientation, intensity of the rotation, the separation of the mark and the action, but always breathing in full and deep, and drawing that line and the exhalation as a clean, consistent stroke. Maybe you begin to see the movement beforehand, or keep using the pen or pencil to think about it a little before, give the body some time to recover from that stronger breath with a few normal ones, and then repeat the cycle. In with a lighter exhalation and lighter drawing. A few rounds to yourself at a speed that starts to settle into that rhythm between a big pulse and the gradual observing and positioning between. Some time for the nervous system to adapt, to take in that replenishing breath, that relaxing exhalation. Time to feel out the space that's developing on the page. Not getting too fast or out ahead of ourselves. Just being there present with one expression of a technique, one way of making line. And that line taking up a little space. But as you feel ready in that cycle of the deep inhalation and the periods of rest and expression, we'll start to move to furthering the notion of motion, picking any of the instances, beginning to connect perhaps from heavier to lighter, from time in the first line to the second line, and connecting end to end with a bit of an arc. Taking your time with it, the first few, getting comfortable with drawing a little bit on a curve and seeing how far that curve might go. You could just go from line to line. You could extend out both sides. I think I'll go and extend past one side for a while, choosing to extend until it reaches near something else, and leave some openness for coming back and creating further extension and connection later on. Here we can let that rhythm normalize a little bit more consistently, breathing in, not too deep, not too shallow, and exhaling with the arc. The breath, a good measure for when to stop the drawing, perhaps. Continuing that not too deep, not too shallow breath between repositions, but when you're ready for the next one, a new orientation, a new exploration of the space of the page and the expression of the motion, that balanced inhalation and exhalation as we draw. Choosing along the way as things reach towards each other to intersect or let them sit separately. Light, easy breaths, finding your attention on that consistency, whether it's in drawing or between strokes. Just a nice, even rhythm to let the nervous system come into being, come into a neutral space, a thing that can guide action and support our presence between action. You may be able to reach up to a rhythm of one breath for connection, moving a little more quickly. Or just letting it stay that even pace with many cycles between as you take in the space on the page. Whatever feels comfortable for your acts of drawing gives you some time to observe, to make a few visual decisions. Find your starting place. Have a bit of a prediction of where it will go. And if things don't quite connect, you can always bring in and fill a little gap, or not worry about a little overextension. Drawing into the lines will fill out the density. As we reach towards perhaps engaging with all of our previous marks, same consistent cycle of breath. Looking and noticing how we've treated things, some places of almost connection, unknown before the arc existed. Maybe bring them together. Places where extension could reach and make new points of contact. Continuity of the flow and the motion. Retracing a few steps to find our style and engagement with this movement across the page. Might see little sequences depending on how you structured the drawing, perhaps an interesting figure, a void emerging between things, moments of overlap. And I will enter a phase of drawing from the field established, the motion established, finding a way to emphasize or enhance that. I think I'll work by drawing the steps between, some more straight lines, lightly flowing between the moments. This can be a little tricky to make a nice straight line that hits through 3 points. You can do your best, follow it out, see where it goes. Can work in the other direction of the grain. Maybe try both as we take 5 minutes of time just to draw, quietly bring surface and continuity to the field. Explore and work within the space, maybe finding new definition to shapes, bringing a bit of a physical characteristic. See the fanning motion of the pleats of paper folded out, emphasizing an edge turn, taking the simple abstract lines and arcs, bringing to them a little thickness, nuance, or keeping them purely about the geometry, whichever expression comes out to you. You start to look at this field of motion, taking time as you draw to meditate or bring to the presence of your mind, thinking through the motion and the action, the accumulation of little steps, of taking a small thing such as a straight line, extending it, moving it, wrapping it in space, can slowly reveal form, perhaps reveal an idea, can begin to change a territory from the simple lines, points, arcs, into surface, material, connection. To start any visual thinking process, we find our tool of thinking beyond the pen or the pencil, the paper for its expression. That tool becomes the way we see the things we can express: shapes, figures, lines, shade, volume. The way we think through those in systems, loose or rigorous, depending on the context. Give us access to gradually build from the abstract to the concrete, or from the simple and individual to the collection and expression of novel territories. You might begin to look for edges, lines of emphasis in the drawing, some that could extend again or reestablish themselves with more intention to mark out the boundaries, expression of motion. The engagement of space within and without, maybe light territories of action that keep working layers from that initial beginning of an idea, concept, moving. The swing or rotation of something. Now becoming a space filling, an action inhabiting condition. So drawing takes on a territory of its own, a map moving along, resolving in greater resolution, revealing landmarks, places of interest, challenging territories, things to notice in our practice, what aspects draw us in, attract us to explore, what aspects cause resistance, some of that the struggle of growth, some of that perhaps an aversion or an uninterest, bringing that level of awareness to your own creative or meditative practice, finding what works well for you as an entry point, finding where you have expression, and doing it in a place like this where the outcome is non-predetermined, only following a few simple steps, and can, at any time in your next few strokes, come to an end and be the completion of a practice or the start of a new idea, depending on how you see it. Little twists and turns, moments, moving, rotating, even bringing connection from one stance to another, fans spreading out, bringing that twist and opening, extending out over space, but animated in that slow movement of time. The instrument, the pen or the pencil, can be a guide in thinking. Our hand, our mechanics can be a guide in seeing. And we can bring all of that motion, action, and expression here onto the paper in front of us as a way to think, to meditate motion, to be expression. I'd love to hear what you found in the exploration of the exercise. Leave it in the comments below and give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Usually there's new episodes every Wednesday morning here on YouTube. Feel free to subscribe if you'd like to get a little meditation each week and build up a set or a repertoire of small, simple actions, simple techniques that you can bring into your everyday life to have a few moments of moving and riding the waves of your breath into a little bit of calm and maybe even exploration or meditation on a concept or thing that is in your mind at that time. Opening up some space is always helpful in seeing things from a new perspective, framing them, giving them context, and ideally engaging them lightly, supplely, and with that calm purpose to let you find the best outcomes. I thank you for joining and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. Draw well.